Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. All good things to you this holiday season. My name is Kevin Connor. I am the host of the Morning Sun on Sun Radio and the acting program director of the radio station that is proud to be the official radio station of the Armadillo Christmas Bazaar now for our 10th year. The Armadillo Christmas Bazaar is in its 49th year, and we have a gentleman here who was the guy who, well, we'll talk about who had the idea, but he is the executive producer of the Armadillo Christmas Bazaar, Bruce Willenzik. Bruce,
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin.
Good to see you again.
Always good to see you, and thank you for doing this down here at the show. And we so appreciate Sun Radio and everything you do, not only for us, but for all the musicians in town. And you've introduced Sun Radio has done such a good job at supporting local music and supporting local institutions, and we love your foundation, what y'all do. It's terrific.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Problem is, for me, I got here 8 months too late. I came to Austin for a wedding, which was in Houston, but I knew I was coming to Austin 8 months after the Armadillo World Headquarters closed. So if you could take us back to 49 years ago, or actually probably 50 years ago, the Armadillo World Headquarters just a couple of hundred yards down the street.
Yes.
Barton Springs and Riverside and South First.
Barton Springs and South First, yes. We were right there next to the skating palace, which was an old Quonset hut, and the Armadillo was in a building that was the National Guard Armory. In fact, the history there started back long before Armadillo. It had been the only music played there was military bands practicing until the Louisiana Hayride showed up there in the mid-1950s. And the first act to play was the lowest guy on the bill, a guy named Elvis Presley.
Whatever happened to him?
He actually had a career. And a pretty big one, yeah. Lasted all the way to 77. But yeah, so that was kind of the little ghost that was there, I think, when Armadillo started. And Eddie Wilson tells the story about the bathrooms were backed up at some club, so he needed to go take care of business, and he did along a fence and looked up and saw a row of windows and decided he was going to investigate the closed down National Guard. And so that became the home of the center of the Austin music scene back then. We weren't yet called the live music capital of the world because Nancy Copland wasn't in town yet, but that's really where it all happened. It was an experiment, a social experiment that actually started before Haight-Ashbury, and that the Austin was famous for its hip people. It had a lot of bohemian types, even back in the early 60s. But Austin was not this kind and tolerant town that it is today. And so when Eddie started the world headquarters, he had some good investors, just enough money to get started. It was all a dream on how we could create something culturally in Austin that was significant and using a better ethic for business. Not so much the profit motive of we need to make the big bucks. It's we need to make the big difference in our community. We need to make this town culturally sound, and we need to do it in a way that we can be proud of instead of ashamed of when we look back at it when we're old men. I'm an old man now, so I can look back at it and be very, very proud. But it struggled. I had about it before I came to Austin. I came in 74. Actually 72. I was bad divorce, left Houston, came up here, rented an apartment, and got involved. And the next spring, I guess it was in May, I was down on the drag. All my friends were vendors down there, and I started to know the hippie community. And I'm walking down the street, and there was this one fairly infamous redhead who was just absolutely beautiful and usually scantily clad and very, very attractive. And I was walking behind her, watching her walk. And it was right at 21st Street, and back then there wasn't a glass there. It was brick to the corner. And I saw a guy walk past me, and I'm watching her, and collision. I ran right into somebody, and we both were falling down. And I saw this guitar in the air, and I reached up and grabbed it. It was Lucinda. It was her first day in Austin. And we met, and she was very grateful that I picked her up and kept her guitar from being damaged. And we went and had a coffee, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And she had some boyfriend with her that she had brought in from New Orleans. And we got to be friends. And then she left, and then she came back without him, and I had moved into a little log cabin near the airport. And so I set her up under the card table at the foot of my bed. And she brought another woman with her who jumped in with me, and she was there for about 6 months. And I started booking her. At the time, I was working with Kurt Van Sickle and Mance Lipscomb and Robert Shaw, the piano player. And so, Lucinda, let me help you. Let's go get some gigs. And it wasn't working well yet. She was still getting her chops down on how to be on stage and get the audience engaged. So she was very, very good at that. And she went on, moved back to town. She got a little house over there. I think it's on 16th Street.
Right.
And went over there for several parties and stuff. And she was way cool, and we were friends. And Lucinda was the kindest, most generous, most giving person I knew. When Mance Lipscomb was sick, and I had to be the primary caretaker for Mance, she was my right hand. She cooked for him. She took care of him with me. It was like the two of us were taking care of our father. And the spirit of the woman, as far as her ability to care for others, made such a difference to me. Was really inspired, and we were really good friends. And she also liked to talk all night. She liked to talk. And I was a good listener, and I was a good talker, so, it was fun, and we enjoyed it. And then one day at the beer garden, this would be in 1975, I think, she came in crying. She was so upset. And I'm glad she came and looked for me when she was upset, because I had a habit of calming her down and getting her to giggle and laugh again. Usually it took about 20 to 30 minutes to get her out of a bad mood and into a good one. So that's what she came down for. And so we're inside, it's a beer garden night, we're up in the crow's nest, and we're smoking cigarettes, and we're talking, and we're laughing now. We ran out of cigarettes. I went down to the machine, and I said, "Hey, you want me to get you a pack?" And this is where the magic happened. She said, "Would you get me 5? 5? What's going on?" "Well, I'm down there on the drag in the market singing to the mural, and I made a lot of friends. And one of my friends was an artist, and she has a new baby, and she's sick, and the baby's sick too, and she can't be out there on the drag. So last month I gave her every penny of the money that came into my guitar case, and I promised her I would do the same this month." I said, "What are you living on?" She says, "Kindness of my good friends like you who will buy me 5 packs of cigarettes." And then she looked up at the ceiling. She looked up, and she said, "It's too bad they don't have a warm, dry place like this to sell in."
Wow.
And it snapped. The inspiration hit me. And I said, "Would you say that again?" She said, "Yeah, thank you for buying me 5 packs of cigarettes." So I gave her a big hug, and I said, "Listen, I got some work to do." I looked at my watch. It was 9 o'clock. I walked her out to her car, got a big hug, and off she went. I ran back in the office. We had a stack of blank notebooks. I grabbed one. I ran into the office, sat down at my desk, and started writing. "Armadillo Christmas Market 5-year plan" was the first thing I wrote.
Wow.
And I started all these notes. And I figured I'd been doing it for maybe 3 hours. I knew I'd got up and gone to the bathroom a few times and the water fountain a few times, but I didn't know what time it was. And someone came in, "Bruce, we need you to bus lunch." I was the kitchen manager, and I liked to be the bus boy at lunch so I could see who ate what. If no one ate the squash, we're not doing that recipe again. So I went back to the office after lunch, and I looked on the desk, and there's 5 full notebooks.
Right.
full, every page. And I'm going, oh, I think I overdid it. So I condensed it down to a page and a half and went into Eddie's office. And Eddie was not really conducive to the idea. And I picked up the paper out of his trash can and walked over to Bobby Hederman, who was booking our music, and said, Bobby, I got a great idea. He said, what did Eddie say? I said, well, Eddie wasn't enthusiastic. He said, well, don't even bother to show me. And I went upstairs to the consultant office where Mike Tollison was. Mike is very good at a lot of things, but he's cautious. He looked at it and said, this is brilliant. We really need to do this. I need 10 years to study it.
10 years?
Yes. So I went down to...
Wait a minute. That doesn't sound very hippie.
No, it wasn't. But remember, this is a very careful and thoughtful attorney
right.
who's going to measure every action. And, you know, that makes him a good attorney, but maybe not the best visionary when it comes to future.
Wow.
So I went down to the kitchen and I talked to the people who were doing the prep. And I said, okay, guys, what do you think of this idea? Well, we loved it. And we're standing in front of the stove. And so we managed to somehow or another every day, we go hang out in front of the stove where the beans were cooking and the food was cooking and the enchiladas were going in and out of the oven and talking. Well, Sean Phillips spent that summer with us. He had a gig in May and he asked, could he plug in and stay? So he was part of our little chat group. And one of the bartenders, Dale Watkins, who was Dale was a bit of a smart ass, but you know, what the heck, you know how that is. And he's walking by and he says, you guys all working on the crackpot conspiracy. I said, wait a minute, look at this pot. I pointed at the bean pot. I said, look, there's no cracks in it. It's full of beans. It's cooking.
Right.
He said, you know what I meant. I said, yeah. So as he walked away, we said, I guess we're going to be the bean pot conspiracy. And you know, I still cook those beans at every organizational meeting.
Wow.
We still keep that tradition.
What kind of beans?
Armadillo pinot beans. It's a recipe we served at the Armadillo Beer Garden for all those years.
There you go.
Yeah, and they're good, and they're really good.
That's one of the things that I've read about the Armadillo is that it was more than a music venue. It was a kind of a community gathering place and had very affordable food.
Very affordable. I mean, one of our hot selling items, a bowl of beans was 50 cents. You want rice in it, it was 60. We had a thing for 85 cents called the Works. And what that was, the bowl of beans with rice with a collar of chips, and it's full of cheese and hot sauce and jalapenos and onions and everything. It was a full meal for 85 cents. And it was a really wonderful thing for people who are working in the area to come have lunch.
Sure.
But the bean pot conspiracy, we're trying to figure it out. Halloween of '76, Eddie left and Hank took over. And one of the things was Eddie didn't want me taking over, and I understand why. So I went over to the Rome Inn for 7 months, and Leah Mecklin, who runs Ospop, she ran the first show. We talked every morning. At that time, Armadillo and the bankruptcy couldn't borrow money overnight, so I'd bring over the money for the cash registers every morning and pick it up at night after we closed.
Wow.
But I wasn't to be in the building when public was there. That was my agreement. So I did that. Leah ran the show. I actually snuck in for 15 minutes. I shouldn't have done it, but I snuck in because I wanted to see what it looked like.
Right.
Well, the next year, Leah and I did it together for Armadillo Productions, and we got it together. And it was much, much, much better. We had a better map of the floor. We had a better command. We started talking to the artist about improving every year. And some of them were not me, and some of them were really good about it. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And by 1980, it was able to pay off Armadillo's bankruptcy.
Wow.
We were the first Chapter 11, which is reorganization, entertainment organization, to pay off a bankruptcy in Texas. And it was the 27th of December. We're up in the accountant's office, and he's counting it up. And he says how much we owe and then how much we have in the bank after the bazaar. And we were $20 short of being able to write the check to pay it all off. I reached in my pocket and plopped a 10 down. Somebody else reached in their pocket and popped down a 5. And Dan Saboka, the bar manager, ran down to the bar, grabbed a tip jar, and dumped quarters on the table. They ran to the bank, they got the cashier's check, and we paid it off that day.
And that was
1980, right before we closed. We closed the 31st, and this was the 27th.
so. What was the decision to close if you were out of bankruptcy?
Well, the reason we closed is because they were selling the property.
Oh, yeah.
The people who owned the property, it was a partnership, and the head guy was M.K. Haig, who had been on the school board, and M.K. was great. His daughter, Robin, every year for her birthday, what do you want for your birthday, daughter? And she said, I want another year of Armadillo being there. And he'd go up on the rent sometimes. After, 10 and a half years, it was up to $0.05 a square foot. It didn't fix anything, but it was just perfect for us to have this wonderful place, which really set the tone for the live music capital of the world. But the way I like to explain what happened to create the Bazaar, there was an instigation. Somebody did something to upset Lucinda. There was an irritation where she was upset. There was a conversation. And in the conversation, there was an inspiration. And I took that inspiration and I put it in a form that would engender cooperation and collaboration. I'm not the founder. What I am is the guy who caught the words and was able to put the words on paper and then explain it to people in a way that everyone wanted to be a part of it. So when we did it in 1981, and I had to go find a facility, I started in January. I looked all over town. And finally this guy calls me up and says, hey, I got a dead Tom Thumb right next to my pizza store. You got to come over and look. So I looked, and the front end was all covered with butcher paper insides. There was one little tear. So I'm standing there for an hour counting ceiling tiles so I could measure the room. And then, okay, who's got this? Well, this is the Cullum Corporation from Dallas owns Tom Thumb. So I called and said, who runs your property? And I got the guy's name and number, and I called, and he wouldn't call me back. And his secretary was, no, you'll have to have an appointment. Well, how do I get an appointment? Well, they're none available now. And they were putting me off on it. So I got in the car, drove to Dallas, stayed with a friend for 2 weeks, walked into his office at 9:30 every morning, sat in the waiting room until 5:30, and then left. And after 2 weeks, I went, this ain't going to happen. But I had invested in real estate with a local guy here, several years before. And I was the first investor. I didn't know I was the first investor till he told me later. So he called me up and says, I have a check for you. So I went out there to his office and got his check. And he said, you found a Bazaar location yet? I said, no, I found a location, but the guy won't call me back. And I told him the name. He says, oh, that guy? Let me call his boss. So I'm sitting in the office. He calls this guy, and they're talking about the vacation they had last summer. And the guy's talking about how his son is now excelling in tennis, and they're talking about their vacation to come, and they're talking about the wives, and they're talking about other fun things they've done years ago. And then he says, by the way, I have a client sitting here who was my first investor, and he'd like to rent a building that you have here in Austin, and your guy won't call him back. He says, I'll take care of it. So I drove home, and there was a phone message from that guy, hey, call me back right away.
Yeah.
So he held me up till November 3rd to get a lease. So we had from November 3rd to December 14th to put together the show.
Wow.
That was a miracle that we pulled it off. And
where was the Tom Thumb?
Cherry Creek Plaza at Stastny and Manchac.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so, it was a lot of fun, and we did well, and the artists loved it. And I had said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to do it next year. And several artists threatened me, and some of the staff threatened me. You have to. This is the best thing ever. And so it kept growing and growing and growing. We lost that building after 3 years, so I went to Tim O'Connor. And I said, Tim, is there any way I can be here? And he said, yeah. It's going to cost you. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And you're going to have to do it this way. And you have to shorten your show because I only have this many days available.
Right.
So we were with him there for 11 years.
At the Austin Opera House.
At the old Austin Opera House.
Right.
And he sold it to a church and had partners, the Lyda brothers, in there. They sold it. And I went in there, and he opened up the Austin Music Hall, which was still under construction as he was revamping the building. And he had said something to indicate, you're always welcome with me. And I really appreciated Tim for that. He was really a good guy to the show. So I walked into this meeting with the church people and sat down, and they said, don't worry about music or beverage. We're going to handle the beverage. There'll be no caffeine or alcohol, and the music hall is going to be church music. And I said, hold on. And I closed my book, put it in my bag, walked out to my car, turned on the ignition, and drove to the Austin Music Hall. I didn't even look back at him as I walked out.
Right.
I mean, there was no need to continue the conversation. We were not going to give up something that was so important to the music scene to lose it. I went down there, and Tim said, yeah, I knew you were coming. And we worked out a deal. So I was 11 years at the music hall. And it was fabulous. What a great venue. The problem was the building was falling apart out from under us, and we couldn't do anything about it. And downtown was starting to grow, and the that warehouse district was filling up with buildings instead of surface parking lots. And I was on the downtown commission, and this guy comes in, and he's going to build a 40-something story building right next door. And I challenged it, as I did everybody building a building downtown. Myself and Teresa Ferguson from the Music Commission, we were the first two to question every developer. How many local cultural businesses are you going to crush while you're being sloppy with your construction was my first question. And then I went right into soundproofing and turned it over to Teresa. And we went back and forth. And the guy was, okay, I get it. And his consultant, his lobbyist guy, he got it. So he called me up next day, wanted to meet. And we went down to the Driscoll and had a fine breakfast down there. Good food. And we talked, and he said, how do I approach him? I said, I'll do the intro. And so he wanted to help Tim build the new Austin Music Hall. So he helped. Tim built it, but it wasn't going to be ready in time for us in 2006 was our last year at the Music Hall. And I'm coming back from a meeting, and I'm walking with the chief fire inspector. And we've walked past that site, and I said to him, you know me, you know what I'm about. Am I going to be okay in that building? Because I can't sleep at night if there's anything dangerous. He says, the city manager will make me okay you because she wants this to happen. But you're not going to be happy in the building. It's not going to be something that really fits the code. It's not going to work the way you want to. And it may not be ready until January, February, March. It's not really going to work for you this year. That was on a Thursday. I called him up on Friday because I needed to hear it one more time, and I had the worst weekend. And I called up Sue Edwards, who was running the Economic Growth and Redevelopment Services Department for the city. And I called her, emailed her Sunday night about 10 o'clock. And I said, you told me if I was in trouble to get hold of you. I'm in trouble. We don't have a place.
Right.
And I spent the night really, really anxiety-ridden. I could not sleep. And early in the morning, I got an email from this guy, Michael Knox, with the city, and he says, we got a meeting coming. And Sue Edwards, she was the next email. Bruce, will you be available to talk at 10 a.m.? I called at 10 a.m. She had everybody I needed to get me in the convention center in the room. I got in the car, drove to City Hall, and by 1 o'clock, she was taking my application to be at the convention center and walking it around to other department heads that needed to sign off. That's the process that normally takes 18 months. 18 hours later, I get the call from the acting director of the convention center department. Bruce, you're in. So we moved to the convention center for 3 years. That was an amazing thing. Here's this little show inside this giant building.
Right.
That had in each one of those halls had all the charm of the hangar deck of an aircraft carrier. And we went in there and we met, and the guy who was the head rigger, he'd hung our show for the 11 years before, so he knew us real well. And he says, we can't put anything on the walls. The only thing that can touch the walls is air and light. Well, if you look at the walls up there, the only thing touching them is air and light. So that's how they gave us the key to how to make it cozy and warm. So like the third day of the Christmas bar, I'm standing there with Jaime, who is the acting director, and he's saying, well, how do you like the building? And I have all these people coming out, oh, it's so cozy in here. He said, I've never heard that word about a convention center before. So
certainly not that one.
Yeah. So Palmer was here, but it had another event here. And when we couldn't get in the convention center anymore because of a big John Deere convention was going to take it for the whole month of December, the whole facility, they asked us if we would move to Palmer. Well, I have history with this building. This actually was my concept many years ago. I was the chair of the Arts Commission, so I knew everyone in performing arts, and I knew everyone in exhibition in this town. And there was a conflict between the two because we had one Palmer auditorium and nothing else. So the problem was, how do we make this work? And I called a meeting. This was like 92, 93, 94. And brought together all the angry at each other stakeholders. And I had 3 things on the agenda. Get it off your chest, 30 minutes. Anything negative you need to say, you need to finish in 30 minutes. 20 minutes into it, one of the people, Joanne Christian, she was on the opera board, she stood up and says, have we heard enough of this? I want to hear what Bruce has to say. And I laid out something I got from Mance Lipscomb, who told me that he loved the younger people because they understood the importance of the word we. We can do anything we believe in as long as we remember we're a we. As soon as we go to us and them, we commence to fighting, and nothing more is going to happen. So I started it off with that and said, we have a choice. We join together as the big we, and we all win, or we split up and nobody gets anything. Who's with me? Quiet in the room. I put out the vision. Performing Arts Center, big exhibition hall, service yard between them, drawing of the parking garage. It was 8 stories tall then. The neighborhood made us drop it to 4. The park. And everybody joined in. 2 hours later, Chamber of Commerce says, hey, your appointment's over. We got another meeting coming. Y'all got to go. We stood in the parking lot till dark. Everybody talking. We met the next week, and the 2 that were the most at odds when they first walked in the week before, they were late. They went to lunch together and lost track of time talking about everything they had in common. And a week later, Leadership Austin came in and started us fighting again and said they were there to help us learn how to get along. And that same woman who said we'd heard enough of the complaints, she got up and said, y'all get out of here. Go find something to do that's important, but we got this handled. And we did. And so we went to council with a report, and one of the council members said, who authorized it? I said, I did as chair of the Arts Commission. Y'all gave me the authority to do this kind of thing when it comes to cultural stuff. So this is important cultural stuff. And it wound up that the problem was Mayor Watson wanted to put the Ice Bats hockey stadium here. So he didn't want us to do it. Daryl Slusher and Jackie Goodman got him. And he says, if we could just figure out the financing, we'll make this work. Right?
There you go.
So Daryl came over to dinner one night, and I said, where's the money from the parking garage going to go? He said, oh, I think that's it. Next day, he calls me from City Hall, and he says, Mayor's on board. We got it. And that's how this building got built.
So is it safe to say that this is now the forever home of the Armadillo Christmas Bazaar?
Well, we built this with the idea of being a 100-year facility, and it's already 25 years old, so we only got 75 more years here.
All right. The thing is, I, like I said, wasn't at the Armadillo, and I missed the Tom Thumb years. I was here, but I didn't know about it.
Right.
But all the other places, the Opera House, the Music Hall, and here I've been to, when you walk into the Bazaar, it feels the same. It feels like the Armadillo Christmas
Right.
Bazaar.
And
The
it
way
still
you
does.
the way you light it, the way you design the booths for the artist, it just feels like it's the Armadillo.
It was magnificent. But what happened was when we were stuck at the music hall all those years, other people wanted to get in we didn't have room for. So we kind of talked to some guys, and they were wanting to have a market for themselves. And we encouraged them to start the Blue Genie. They were already Blue Genie Art. They were, that was the name of their studio. So get a facility or rent a facility and get some craftspeople in there. And then my youngest brother, he asked for my list of exhibitors, and I said, why? He says, I'm going to open a store on Burnett Road and call it A-Town. So they kind of took over the inexpensive craft market. And then we went to the convention center. We could finally open it up. And we loved art shows, fine art shows.
Sure.
And we knew many of the fine artists, and they all were wanting to get in the show. And sorry, it's local identity. We started bringing some of them in. The other problem is I was getting older and older and older. And when we moved to the convention center in 2007, it was so complex. Annie and I went, we can't do this like this forever. So at the beginning of 2008, I invited over 4 different young women on 4 different nights who worked the show, invited them over to our house for dinner, and just asked them, how do you see your life unfolding? How do you see your future? And we got the idea that all of them were decent candidates for possibly being the one who would take it when I got too old. So then we invited the 4 to come together. And it was a very interesting night. One of them asked, why are we here? And I said, it's about the future of the show. And they got real quiet, and the look on their face, very, very intent. So what about it? I said, well, I just turned 60, so that was 17 years ago. Are you sick? No, I'm in great health. My doctor's jealous of how healthy I am, but the calendar pages keep turning, and we got to talk about the future. Well, what can you do? I said, well, I can run it till I'm too old and then close it down, and y'all will have this fabulous memory of everything you had, when you were young. Well, I don't want you to, but we don't want you to. Calendar pages are going to dictate that, not me. Well, what else? Well, I called it Festival Corporation of America, but you know who I'm talking about. They're trying to buy it every year. I said, but I don't really want to sell it. And I would rather it be something you continue to be proud of, because I don't think anyone's going to run it the way I did.
Right.
And then one said the right words, what can we do?
There you go.
And I said, that's why you're here. I want you all to form a team. I'm going to call it the Armadillo team, the A team. And I want you all to self-organize and each find your passions in the show. Because when your team, or if y'all select a leader, gains my trust, the trust of the community, the trust of the press, the trust of the artist, the trust of everyone else involved, I'm going to give it to you. And so they did. It was 4 young women. After a while, one dropped out. Then enough. They had elected Ann Johnson, which was Ann Kelly then, as their leader. And I went, okay, I guess this is settled. Ann's going to be the one. And so we started working intently with Ann. She said, what does it take to run an art show? I said, oh, running an art show is so easy. There's nothing to it, unless you want to run a good one.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to run like this, it's a lifetime of dedication and working all day every day of the year. She said, I'm up for it. She told me when she was 8 years old that she wanted my job one day.
Wow.
And she had worked every day since to get herself ready. And now, I have to think she's probably one of the most respected art show directors in America. And she has helped this grow and turn into where now the top echelon of the National Fine Art Touring Circuit is competing to get into the show. At first, it was that echelon of the local Austinites who tour like that, and there's many of them. Rachel Dory over there is the one I can see first, but she's local Austin, and she's big star at many shows all over the country, and there's a bunch of them in here. And that's what made the show grow, and we kind of passed off being the place where you can buy the $5 and $10 gifts, and instead became the place that really grew with the city's taste, that
Right.
changed with the city, yet stayed the same. That was the important thing. You keep the vibe. You keep the way we do it. You don't mess that up. But you adjust to Austin as Austin adjusts. At the world headquarters, hey, dirt was chic. There ain't no difference if the carpet smelled a little bit and was dirty. Nowadays, no, you wanted to have it clean. You wanted to have it fitting to Austin's taste. So that's what we did and how we converted it to now. And I look around this room and I see what's here. I don't know how much more time we have, but just a short.
Actually, we're
over?
We're over time right now, but I'd love to continue the conversation later this week if possible.
It's possible. Let's see who doesn't show up for an interview and I can pop in.
Oh.
But some days I'm not going to come in until lunch because I'm 77 now and kind of old, so I need my rest.
Well, some of the finest piano players in Texas are getting up here in a second. They got to set up for Piano-Rama.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna make room for them to do that. But Bruce Willenzik, he says, I'm not the founder, but he is the person that Lucinda said we need a place for these artists, and he put pen to pad and came up with the plan. So you don't want to be called the founder, but without you, this wouldn't exist. How about it for Bruce Willenzik, ladies and gentlemen?
Thank you. There's a few others that wouldn't exist without him. Leah, who runs Ostpop, we wouldn't have had the second year without her doing it, stepping up in the first year, and we wouldn't have had the last 10 years without Ann Johnson stepping up.
There you go.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
My
Always
pleasure.
a pleasure.
Bruce Willenzik.